I want to show to you that the Bible is not a compilation of the works of men. It is nothing like it ever in the history of the world. The plans of God are not an afterthought. If you look up here on this chart, you see eternity and eternity. In eternity past, God made a lot of plans. And we talk about election, and I talked about the riddle of election yesterday. I want to ask you a question today. Marilyn, you were there. Ray, you were there yesterday. Let's see what you learned. Now, according to supralapsarian theologies, there's supralapsarian, interlapsarian, sublapsarian, and then we have modified Amyraldian, and then we go into Armenian theology, which is works for salvation. From one end of it to the other end of it, and both are extremes. Brother Ray, what is the first decree that God made according to supralapsarian? What is the first decree that he made?
He decreed there's those to be saved, that decreed to be elected saved, and those to be damned.
Okay. Before God ever did anything, created anything, he elected the saved and the damned. They were elected to be as they are. The reprobate were elected and created in the mind of God, and the elect was created. What is wrong with that? Are the damned, are they immediate creation, or self-created? Self-created. Now tell me what immediate creation is.
Immediate?
Mm-hmm.
That's the primary creation?
That came from nothing else except the person of God. Immediate creation we have in Genesis 1:1. It says, Barashith bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et ha'aretz. In one of the beginnings, he had created, God, the heavens and the earth. All right? And then it says in Genesis 1 or 2, Vi ha'aretz hathiatuhu vavohu. And the earth she had become formless and void. And then God began to his immediate creation. You know what immediate creation is? Immediate creation. That means that he created or reformed something from former materials. God began to reconstruct the earth. He created it to begin with. Now that's an immediate creation. And then a secondary creation is woman is a secondary creation. Where did woman come from? Man. So she is immediate creation. Man now, many people believe that God created man from the dust of the ground. But what does the Hebrew say, Brother Ray? He created him from the same elements as the dust of the ground, and so man is a primary creation of God. He's an immediate creation of God. Yes.
On that side, I was looking at this morning,
Mm-hmm.
because I was reading the system ideology, but they say that, well, see, so Adam's body must have been secondary and made from the dirt. But I'm hoping I'm right on this. The dirt was originally in the primary creation.
Yes.
The immediate creation.
It's an immediate creation.
It's an immediate creation.
Mm-hmm.
So that won't put him in the secondary state of any form of him. Not his body. Because,
well, now, Thiessen says that man is an immediate creation of God, not immediate. That he's created from some other source, but he is not. Man came from the same source that the dust came from. They came from the same source, which is the person of God.
Right.
And this is what we call, or what has been called in Latin, ex nihilo, out of nothing.
Right.
But God did not create all of this out of nothing. It came from him. Even though it did not exist before, it came from God. Now, this is deep stuff, I know. But now what I want to ask you, are the reprobate immediate or self-created?
Immediate. Self-created.
Okay, God did not create the reprobate. According to supralapsarians, the first edict, the first decree, is that God would decree to create the elect and the reprobate. So then God would be creating something that was bad with me. That's not possible. God cannot create anything that's bad. The reprobate are not immediate. They're not even immediate, even though they are, because all of us are lost sinners because of the blood of our fathers. Brother Tom, we are the one that put the infection of sin in our children. It's not our wives. And therefore, because of that, the sin of mankind goes to the blood of man. So therefore, the woman, if she could have a child outside of the use of a man, the child would be sinless. And there we have the possibility of our sinless Savior, which has no blood of man in him. The very blood of God. We are infected with this sinful nature from our fathers. And therefore, we are immediate creation because mankind, Adam and Eve created us, did they not? So we're not, Adam was immediate creation, Eve was immediate creation, and all of us are immediate creations. But what we do with our mind and our wills in our life puts us where we're going to go in eternity. Because one thing Genesis 1:26 says, God said, let us make man in our shadow casting, our spiritual likeness, in our blood flowing likeness, in the person like Jesus would be, and in our sovereign likeness, let him have dominion over everything. So God made man in his physical, spiritual, and his sovereign likeness. So all mankind are in his sovereign likeness. You understand that? All men have volition. Now, let's go back. Now, we touched that just a little bit. I know that was deep stuff, but there it is. Okay. Now, I want you to understand the Bible is not a compilation of the works of men. It is so intricate and so detailed. We're going to study the tabernacle, which is a type of Christ and a type of the church. It's a double type. And this is it right here. And you have little things that I drew up, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. But first, let's go to John, the first chapter, and let's look at what John, the first chapter says. John, the first chapter, is a tremendous book. There are 4 Gospels. Now, look at your little chart like this. See a little chart like this? Look at that for just a moment. How many directions are there around there? 4 directions. Okay, and there are 4 flags. I haven't seen, well, since I put this chart out on the internet, people have been copying it a little bit, which is good. This is the original. There was never one like this before. It's not perfect by any means, and it's all scribbled up, as you can see. But there are 4 directions around there. And we have 4 groups of the tribes of Israel around there. It's north, south, east, and west now. As you can see, now this right here is east. That is east. Now, this tabernacle was a fence. Had a fence around it. And around this fence there were 4 groups of the tribes of Israel. The east, there was a flag that was blue in the background and had the head of a lion on it. And that flag represents the Gospel of Matthew. I've written down there, Matthew. Matthew looks upon Jesus as what? The Gospel of Matthew. The Gospel of Matthew looks upon Jesus as the King of Israel. By the way, Jesus' words, quoting Psalm 22 and verse 1, and actually he quoted the whole psalm, and that's the suffering Messiah. Psalm 22 and verse 1 starts out in Hebrew, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. In Aramaic, it's Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Now, it's quoted 2 times, once in Hebrew, in the book of Matthew, and then in Aramaic. Hebrew and Aramaic, both. But what does it say? My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And this is the King of Israel. All right, so we have east, and now let's look down to west. What do we have in west? We have a flag that's yellow or golden with a what on it? A calf. Okay, now what gospel? It shows Jesus as our burden bearer. The word cow in Hebrew is voker. Say voker. Voker. Voker means to break. Voker. You can say vokato. That means good day. Good morning, actually. Voker means to break. And an animal strong enough to pull a plow breaks it. So there we have the voker. We have the cow. We have the ox and all of this. These are strong enough to break. Christ is our servant. Here's our burden bearer. And the Gospel of Mark tells us that. And now let's look down south. We won't go into the tribes yet. But south we have a man, the face of a man on a flag. And the face of a man, which gospel shows Jesus as a real man? Genuine man. Luke. The Gospel of Luke. Luke was a physician and a scientist and a physicist. He was an expert witness in the life, birth, death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. He uses the word autopsy. Autopsy is a Hebrew or is a Greek word. Autopsy means to see for yourself. It means to see for yourself. Now, when someone is killed, they do an autopsy on a child or man or woman or whatever it is, don't they? That means they take them apart and they look inside for themselves how the person died. And they'll say, well, he died of a head wound, he died of poison, he died of a car accident or bullets or whatever. And this is what we call autopsy. That's the term that Luke uses. Now let's go up to the north. Now the north. Now, as you're looking at this chart, if you were here just like me, this is exactly the right directions. North is that way. And on that flag was an eagle. And where does an eagle spend a lot of its time? Soaring in the sky. And the Jews looked upon the eagle as a heavenly being. So Jesus is our heavenly being, and the Gospel of John tells us about Jesus being our heavenly God. So let's go to the Gospel of John quickly, and let's look at what the Gospel of John says. All right? Not too many books up here. John 1 and 1. I will go into this from Greek a little bit, because this is a Hebraism. We have to understand the Hebraism, or you won't understand this verse at all. In Greek it says, Anarche ein ho logos, kai ho logos, ein proston, theon kai, theos ein ho logos. In beginning. Now, in Genesis 1 and 1 it says Barashith. Barashith, Baith on the front of that, is in. Rosh is beginning. And Tau on the end of that, Barashith, that's plural. So what it says in the book of Genesis, in one of the beginnings, someplace back here yonder, in eternity past, in one of the beginnings, God created the heavens and the earth. The heavens and earth were not created in time. They're created in eternity past. I want you to understand that. There are people today that say the earth is only 6,000 years old. They better go back to the Hebrew. Because the Hebrew says, the Bible says that God created the heavens and the earth in eternity past. And then something happened to the heavens and the earth. God does not create anything indestructible in a chaos, does he? In Genesis 1 or 2 it says, and the earth she had become a chaos and an upheaval. Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 tells us what happened to the earth. The earth was destroyed by Satan. And Satan was not created a bad being, was he? He was created perfect. Every fallen angel was created perfect, but they were created with a volition, a sovereignty. As far as I can see, everything that God created has a will. And nearly everything that God created is triune except for spirits. Angels are triune. They are clothed beings. They have spirit, they have souls, and they have form. And they can go between dimensions. Spirits are not clothed. They don't have form. But they seek to dwell in human or animal flesh. And one sermon I did here a while back, we talked about the pigs. I don't remember which one it was because I preached so many sermons. I preached 100. This is the 111th sermon this year, so preached a lot of them. Okay? Well, spirits seek to dwell in human or animal flesh. They're not clothed. So they seek form. Angels have spirits. Now, the Nahash, what's a Nahash?
Snake.
The snake, the serpent in the garden, loaned his body to Lucifer. And Lucifer's spirit went into him. He was a willing subject. God created the snake. And it says, and the snake had become wicked. Arum. Wicked. Deceitful. Sneaky. He had become that way. He wasn't created that way. Satan became that way. Lucifer became that way. Hallel is his. Lucifer actually is from the Latin Vulgate. Lucifer means light carrier. The name Luke is Lucifer. Okay? Any child named Luke or any person named Luke, his name is actually Lucifer. Lucifer is not a bad name. Lucifer means light or shining one. But Lucifer became evil. He became Satan. He was not created that way. God did not create the earth in chaos. The Babylonian idea of the earth is that God created a chaos, and out of chaos he formed order. But the Bible just says strictly that God did not create chaos. He doesn't create imperfect things. We see today the Jews believe. The Jews went on into the Babylonian captivity for a long time, didn't they? Well, they got over there, they got involved in this creation from chaos, and when they translated their Bible into the Septuagint, they brought that idea into it. And they did it wrongly. And today, if you take the Jewish Publication Society book, which I have one in my library there, it'll say, in the beginning, God began to create the heavens and the earth. And the earth continued to be formless and void. Because they believe in the Babylonian idea of creation. They got contaminated with it. But that's not what the Hebrew Bible says. The Hebrew Bible says, in one of the beginnings, he had created. He had created. That's finished product, bara. Third person masculine singular, cal perfect. He had created the heavens and the earth. And then the earth. It says, and the earth, she had become formless and void. Chaos. And then God begins to reconstruct the earth from there on. That's immediate creation, not immediate. What happened to the earth in Genesis 1 and 2 is a immediate creation, not an immediate creation. That's the difference. Now we're going to talk about this tabernacle, but this tabernacle is in the mind of God, and this tabernacle is a type of God. Okay? Genesis 1 and 1, it says NRK. Now NRK there, in is the same word that we have in English. It's a preposition. Page 137 in the little analytical Greek lexicon, if you want to look that up. And then RK there is locative singular feminine. That means nothing else existed. This is out in eternity past. There's no further back. You go out here in eternity past only when God existed. Before anything was created, before any plans were ever made. Okay? I know it's hard to fathom that, isn't it?
Yes.
The word eternity in Greek is aistonion tonion. It means ages upon ages upon ages upon ages. But in the Hebrew, it's one word. It is olam. The word olam in Hebrew simply means to go back as far as you can imagine. Go back as far as you can think. And that's where eternity begins. Okay? That's where it begins. Imagine back as far as you can think in eternity past, and that's where it just begins. That blows our minds away, doesn't it? Okay? This is beautiful stuff. This is when that was, right here. It's olam. This is before anything ever was existed, anything ever was brought in except the person of God, and there was a time in eternity past, and we use the word time there incorrectly, because eternity isn't measured. Before anything was able to be measured, there was a specific period back there in eternity past when only God existed, and that's what it's talking about here in John 1:1. NRK, ain. The word ain there is third person singular and perfect indicative active. It comes from Amy, and it means he kept on being. He kept on existing. Okay? He kept on existing. Hologos. Now, hologos is not Greek. It's Greek, but it's not Greek. This is a Hebraism. Now, Exodus 20 and verse 7 says, "Thou shalt not use the Lord thy God's name in vain, for he shall require it of you." And so, from that period of time on, the Jews, when they come to the name of God, which is Jehovah, Yod, He, Waw, He, in Hebrew, they would say, Ha-the-bar, the word. Ha-the-bar. Say Ha-the-bar. Now, the equivalent of that in Greek is hologos. So who are we talking about here? We're talking about Jehovah. This is not the logos in the Greek idea was the idea of the original creator also. But it's not Greek that we're talking about here. This is a Hebraism. This is coming from the Hebrew mind, and John was a Hebrew, wasn't he? You can go back in Volume 1 and Kyle and Delise, page 184 to 191, and you can read about this, what I'm talking about. The Ha-the-bar was Jesus of the Old Testament. The word Jehovah means what? What's Jehovah mean? It comes from Hayah in Hebrew. It means the one who shall become. Okay? The one who shall become. So as you look at this, it says, in beginning, kept on being the Jehovah. That's what how it should be translated. This is a Hebraism. And then it says, Kai, hologos ein proston theon. And the Jehovah, or the Ha-the-bar, or the hologos, he kept on being proston theon. Now, the idea there is he kept on being inseparable from Godhead. Did Jesus ever cease being God? No. And that's what it says there. Now, if you could get a Jehovah's Witness pinned down and hold them down in one place, nail them down, this right here would destroy their whole theology. It's done. It's over with. And this is what it says. This is it. Jesus kept on being a part of the Godhead always. Jesus was Jehovah of the Old Testament. And the Word, the hologos, the Jehovah, kept on being toward the God. And then we have the word Kai again, except here it is like a particle of affirmation or a causative construction. Kai, page 208, you can read all this in the Analytical Greek Lexicon. And God kept on being the Word, or you can say here, the Word kept on being God. It doesn't make any difference. Because that word ain there, here is an equal sign. You know what? 1 plus 1 equals 1, 2 equals 2, 3 equals 3. You know how that is in mathematics? That is a mathematical sign. Grammatically, this is a mathematical sign. Now, theos and logos, they end with an os in Greek, which is an omicron sigma. That's nominative, singular, masculine. Number, gender, and case. It tells us what they are. And here we have 3 sentences in one sentence. 3 sentences in John 1 and 1. First of all, it says, in beginning kept on being the Word. One sentence. Kai hologos ein proston theon. Sentence number 2. Sentence number 3 is Kai theos ein hologos. And God was the Word, or the Word was God. Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses will take their New World Translation into linear, and they will see. It says, see, the Word was a God. Because they won't say that Jesus is God. But Jesus is God. Now, that's doing violence to the Scripture because grammatically this is a predicate nominative. A predicate nominative means that everything on one side of that equal sign, or linking verb, is the same person, number, gender, and case as that which is on the other side. I had a Jehovah's Witness woman one time. She was real good in grammar. She taught at the high school and all this. She taught Spanish and everything. And I wrote this verse out in Greek. And I only put the grammar down there. I didn't tell her how it was supposed to be translated at all. Okay? And she translated it for me correctly. I was up at Sizzler, up on, this was about 35 years ago, Sizzler up on Mount Vernon. And I had her, I said, now translate. This was grammar. I said, this is a preposition, and the preposition means in. Okay, we got that. RK. All right, and it's singular. In beginning. How many beginnings? One. And I said, third person singular, imperfect, indicative, active. How would you translate that? Oh, that would be kept on being. And then I'd say, hologos. What does that mean? Oh, the word. Okay. And then the word kept on being toward the God. She got all that down there. And then it said, and the word was the God. The God was the word. I said, because we got one definite article there, that's a the. But actually, there's two definite articles there. We don't have to repeat them. So we have, the word was the God. Yeah, that's what it says. Then she looked at me and she said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Just like it, I've been a Jehovah's Witness. I'm third generation Jehovah's Witness. I don't believe this. I didn't know what this was here. This is John 1:1. I said, what does it say? We don't need to look at this language. We don't need to look at that. She just told me, we don't need to look at that. We don't need to look at that. I don't believe that. But I said, what does the Bible? You say you believe the Bible. What does the Bible say? Now I said the figure of speech here is that hologos is ha-the-var, the word, which is the Jehovah. I can't believe that. I can't believe that. I can't believe that. I said, but what does it say? Let's go on. And the Jehovah kept on being the Word. The God kept on being the Jehovah. Now let's look here in verse number 2. See, the Bible is not a compilation of different writers. Just thinking up things and writing. These people are inspired by God to do this. Now, God let them use their own words, their own ideas and everything else, but they put it down perfectly. I used to train horses a long time ago, a lot of horses. And I could make a horse move without you ever even knowing that I made the horse move. I taught what was called Western dressage. My father, my stepfather that is, Dale Remling, taught the Lipizzan stallions. He trained the Lipizzan. He worked for Cord. We worked for Cord up in Fish Lake Valley. Cord was the man that built the Cord, Duesenberg, and Auburn cars. And Dale trained his horses for him. He bought some. He went over to Arabia and bought them right out of the Bedouin tents, the best Arabians. You can't buy those Arabians here. They're not to be found. Those Arabians over there are like cold bloods. They're real calm, just like little children, like an old draft horse, cold, what you call a cold blood. You bring them over here and they're just so calm. They're not that high-strung hot blood that you find here. I mean, they will go forever. They have that strain in them. But they are so calm. He could just make them dance. Just dance. Well, I could make a horse dance like that too. They dance sideways and dance that way. Serpentine, lead changes and all this kind of stuff. And without ever, hardly, you couldn't see me key the horse. I leaned my weight on that horse. One time, about 1984, I had trained this quarter horse, a poco horse. I trained the horse, and I took him out to the stable out there, and I was teaching riding classes out at Hackensack Stable. And I put the horse in the paper because he wasn't a good enough cow horse for me to cowboy on him. He wasn't strong enough to be a cow horse in the mountains. He was wonderful cutting horse and everything else, but he didn't have strong enough legs and feet to cowboy like I was cowboy. So I sold him. I was going to sell him, and I think I wanted $10,000 for him or something. I gave $700 for him, and I trained him. I trained him for like 4 years. 4 years of training that horse. So a guy came and brought this brand new Oldsmobile. He wanted to trade me this Oldsmobile for this horse. So I took him out to the Hackensack Stable, and I told him, I don't remember what his name was. He lived on Apple Street out there in Fairfax, right next to my old coon hunting buddy Jim Van Hoosen. And I got him out there, and I told him now, I said, have you ridden a horse before? He said, I'm from Texas. That means something, I guess. I don't know. And I said, well, have you ever ridden a broke horse? Have you ever ridden a broke horse? He said, oh, yeah, I rode broke horses. I rode wild horses. I said, this horse broke. Now, you can shoot off of this horse. You can ride him through a stream or river or whatever you want to do. You can do anything to him you want to. He's broke. But I said, when you get on him, you better sit in the middle of that saddle or else he'll turn out from underneath you. Because I trained him Western dressage. Now, when I'm out there cutting a cow with him, all I have to do is just shift my weight, and he'll go that way. And when I shift my weight that way, he's going to go that way. I said, sit in the middle of that saddle. And keep your feet, both feet, steady in the saddle, in the stirrups. And go down there. Now, I showed him out there. I spun him one way. I spun him the other way like a top. I did serpentine lead changes. He would go left reed, right reed, and change them without ever keying him that you could see. And I rolled him in a circle like that and rolled him back. Rolled him back, rolled him back. Rolled him against the fence. And then I said, now, you get on him. He said, wow, that's a good-looking horse. He said, man, I'll trade you right now. I said, ride him. I said, remember, set in the middle of the saddle. I said, lope him off. And all you have to do is to go. That means go. That means lope. Okay? I said, only click one time if you want him to walk. 2 times if you want him to lope. He got in there and the horse took off in the lope like that. And he was wobbling around in that saddle, and the horse turned out from underneath him and fell off the horse. He got up, and he said, that horse has got power steering, man. He said, I never rode anything like this in my life. He said, I want that horse. We'll put him in, his daughter was going to show him, you know. He got back up. I said, stay in the middle of the... He said, you got to train me. He said, I don't know how to ride a horse. That's the way God used the writers of the Bible. Like they used their own talents, but they put down exactly what God wanted. Now, we have John writing this book. Now let's look and see what God spoke through him. First of all, he tells us that God was in the beginning. That's the oldest verse in the Bible, John 1:1. There is nothing goes back further in eternity than that. And then John 1:1, now it tells us that Jesus is Jehovah, and Jehovah is Jesus. Okay? And Jehovah is God, and that he's an inseparable part of the Godhead. That's what John 1:1 tells us. Okay, you got it? John 1:2 now. Hutos ein arche proston theon. It says, this one, he kept on being in the beginning toward the God. He says that twice. That Jesus is an inseparable part of the Godhead. Okay, that's it. This one, hutos. Back over there, that's nominative, singular, masculine, demonstrative pronoun, hutos. This one, this very one that was in John 1:1, hologos. Hologos ein proston theon. Kai hologos ein hotheos. This one. See, all of those are in the nominative, singular, masculine, number, gender, and case, the same one. And now he says, this one, he kept on being in the beginning toward the God. Now, 1 and 3. 1 and 3. All things by the agency of him were caused to come into being. Right there, agenitos. And outside of him, nothing came into existence. Not one thing has come into existence. That's what it says. Now, Colossians 1, 16 and 17, and Hebrews 1, 2 and 3 tells you the same thing. This is not a verse that's just taken out of the Bible. You can't take one verse in the Bible and teach anything from it. The Bible is no single verse is a private interpretation, is it? You can't take and make a doctrine out of one verse. There's where we have error and where we have heresy. There's where we have supralapsarianism. That's where we have Arminianism. The two extremes. Now, someplace yonder in the middle there is where the truth is. My teachers used to tell me, here's radical over here, here's radical over here. Someplace in the middle has got to be truth. So there we see that. 1 and 3. All things by the agency of him and belonging to him and from him. That's all in that word auto there. You're not looking at that in your Bible, but that's him. It was caused to come into being, and nothing outside of him became into being. Not one thing has come into existence. John 1 and 4. In him, life kept on being. That's what it says. In him, life kept on being, and the life, it kept on being the light of the mankind. Now, let me show you this. What does Hillel mean, or Lucifer? Light carrier. When God originally created the original heavens and the earth, who was the caretaker of the earth? Lucifer. Ezekiel 14, or Isaiah 14, 12 to 15, Ezekiel 28. How many Edens are there in the Bible? 2. One in eternity past and one in space and time with Adam in it. Eden is a throne room. Lucifer was in the throne room, and he was a light carrier at that time. And when he went into darkness, the only light left is God. And then God made the light, the sun shine, which did shine in the original creation, but it was dimmed. But he makes it shine again. By the way, in immediate creation and immediate creation, it's instantaneous, that's the first creation. The second creation was immediate creation, a reconstruction of the earth. We studied that up there, Secrets from Genesis. Now, when God made in the second reconstruction of the earth, were the plants and the seeds already there?
Yes.
Yep. And he caused them to sprout. They were already there. He calls them sprout. And that is not an immediate creation. That is immediate creation, a reconstruction. Okay? You're learning something? Is it too much? I don't mean to make it too much. And in him life kept on being. And the life, it kept on being the light of mankind. Now, we could go back and I could print you out all of the titles of Jehovah. All the titles of Jehovah. We did that up there at the church up there. I'm going to read to you real quick. Jesus is the fulfillment of all of the Jehovah titles. Jehovah means what? He who shall become. Jehovah Jireh is the Lord will provide. Genesis 22. Now, Abraham saw Jehovah. And the word Jehovah Jireh, it means the Lord shall provide, but it doesn't really mean that. It means the Lord was seen. The Lord will see to it. Jireh means to see. The Lord was seen. Did we see Jesus in all the four Gospels? Did we see Jesus? Did we see who the person was? Yeah. Jesus told those Pharisees, they said to him, he said, before Abraham was, I am. I am there, ego eimi. That's the Greek translation of Hayah. Asher Hayah Asher. I am that I am in Hebrew, which is the name of God. They wanted to kill him, didn't they, when he said that? For blasphemy. All right. Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rafika, the Lord our healer. Was Jesus a Lord? Is he healer? Did he heal anybody in his ministry? All right. Jehovah Nissi, the Lord our banner. The Lord our banner. Will he be the Lord of Israel, the one that fought all the battles of Israel? The Lord our banner. Did he fight did Jehovah fight the battles of Israel? Shall he, in Revelation, the 9th chapter, shall he come back leading his army? By the way, his army doesn't have to do anything. He does it all. Jehovah Nissi, the Lord our banner. Jehovah Makadesh, the Lord that sanctifies us. Does Jesus sanctify you? Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is here. The Lord is peace. The Lord our peace. Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. Jesus called the Lord of hosts even by his own brother, James, in the book of James. Jehovah Siddiqenu, the Lord our righteousness. Jesus died for our sins and was raised for our justification to make us righteous. Jehovah Shamanah, the Lord is there. Jehovah Elyon, the Lord, the Most High God. Is Jesus the Most High? Yes. Jehovah Roeh, the Lord my shepherd. John, the 10th chapter, is a repeat of Psalm 23. Is it not? Let's go on a little bit further. Jehovah Sabaoth, Lord of armies. Jehovah Hosanenu, Lord our maker. If we just said, didn't he make all things? Mm-hmm. Is that who he is? Yeah. Jehovah Elohika, the Lord our God. Is he our God? Do you ever cease being God? Jehovah Elohim, Jehovah, the physical expression of the invisible God. Is he or is he not? And then Jehovah Adonai, Ha-Adonai-im. In Revelation 19th chapter, it says the Lord of Lords. On his thigh was the Lord of Lords. And it comes from the Hebrew, Adonai Ha-Adonai-im, the Lord of all lords. Jesus is our God and our Maker. In life, he was life, and the light was the light of mankind. And then it says, in the light, in the darkness, it shines, and the darkness, he not receives it. Those in darkness will not receive it. Those that want to stay in darkness. The most dangerous gift that God ever gave to mankind was the freedom of will. That can damn you. Because you're sovereign. God created you in his sovereign will. And 1:6 says, it became a man having been sent from God, and named to him John. Now, in the last book of the Old Testament, it says that God would send the Messiah. The Messiah, a forerunner. The Messiah would come, but that God would send a forerunner to him to announce his coming. Now let's go to John 1:14. And the word flesh, Kaiho Logos Sarx Agenito, and the word flesh, and the Jehovah flesh he became, and he eskenusen, third person singular, first aorist, indicative active. Eskenusen meant that he tabernacled among us. Look at this tabernacle. That's what it's talking about right there. And then we find out in the Old Testament that the reason why God told Moses to build the tabernacle is because he wanted to dwell among his people, and that tabernacle is a type of Christ. Okay? And the word, the Jehovah flesh, sarx, flesh. The Hebrew is basar. The word flesh, the Jehovah flesh he became. And he pitched his tent and he tabernacled among us. And we beheld the glory of him, the glory as the only begotten from beside the Father, full of grace and truth. Grace is we're saved by grace. And what does truth mean? Aletheia. Truth means no shadow. No darkness, no shadow. When you look at something, when you're doing jewelry or something, Tom, you've got to look at it from every angle, don't you? You've got to have real good light, real good lighting. That's what it means. Truth means to have no shadows. And then let's go to 1:18. And it says, God no one has seen, no, not ever. It says the only begotten God. Look at that. The only begotten God, the one being in the bosom of the Father. That one, he has led himself out, literally. Now God led himself out of eternity into space and time in the person of Jesus Christ. That's what it says. Now this book that we have here is an inspired, eternal book. In the mind of God, we see all kinds of beauty. In the book of Exodus, I'm translating the book of Exodus right now. I've taught a lot of it. I'm working on and fine-tuning it right now. And we're right where God creates or calls us to be created, the tabernacle. But this tabernacle is in heaven. In Hebrews, the 9th chapter, now even the first covenant had regulations and divine worship and the earthly sanctuary. And the earthly sanctuary, that's the dwelling place. That's the tabernacle. For there was a tabernacle prepared, the outer one, in which were the lampstand and the table and the sacred bread, is called the holy place. The Kadesh Makom. Kadesh Makom. And then it says behind it, it's talking about the altar here and the mercy seat. It talks about that in the Old Testament there was a tabernacle. And this tabernacle typified Jesus. So in the New Testament it tells us in the book of Hebrews and many other places that Jesus is typified in the tabernacle. That's it. Here's a different view of the tabernacle right there. A different view of it. This tabernacle is a pretty big area. From here to here is 50 yards. Okay? 50 yards. That's 150 feet. How long is a football field? 100 yards. That's 100. That's 300 feet. So this whole fence out here is half as big as a football field. Okay? Half as big as a football field. It is a rectangular thing. Now let's go back to your little chart. And I have one someplace. The little chart. And we have this 150-foot object here. But around this 150-foot place, there are tribes. Now, Jacob is one of the most pitiful men in the Bible, but one of the greatest characters that I can think of. Everybody wants to be like Paul, don't they? Wasn't he a great apostle and all that? Well, I'll tell you something. To be like Jacob is hard. Paul, we know, was divorced from his wife. His wife divorced him when he became a Christian. His children disowned him and all that. He, according to history sources, he became a eunuch. He had himself made a eunuch for the purpose of God. And this is where the Catholic Church gets this idea of having celibacy in 1123 A.D. They invented the hellish doctrine of celibacy. That's right there, okay, in church history on that chart. That's caused trouble ever since in the Catholic Church. Nothing but trouble.
I'm sorry,
Well,
talking about Jacob or Paul?
Paul made himself. Now, Jacob was a big man. He was a powerful man. He was the breadwinner of his family. And Jacob had a brother named Esau, Harry. That's what his name means, Harry. Red Harry. That's red. All right? Harry and red. That's what Jacob was. But he was a playboy. He did not think anything about the promises of God. He never thought about tomorrow. He lived for today. And God told Rebekah she had 2 children wrestling in her womb. And this is in the book of Genesis, but it also is repeated in the book of Malachi, the 1st chapter, and the 2nd and 3rd verses. Now let's look at that just quickly. I can say all this stuff, but you need to look at it for yourself. So you'll know I'm not lying to you, and I'm not making up all this stuff. This is really the truth. And it's really found in the Word of God. In Malachi means messenger. It means my messenger, actually, Melech. In Hebrew, that means angel, by the way. My angel, my messenger. The oracle of the word of Jehovah to Israel through Malachi. I have loved you, says the Lord, but you say, how have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Declares the Lord, yet I love Jacob. I tell you what, the Lord knew. Jacob knew the Lord loved him. Jacob had nothing but trouble in his life. Nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble. All of his life was trouble. Constant obstacles. If you want to really look, the good things happen to bad, or bad things happen to good people, study Jacob's life. I hear people bending him down all the time, bashing him, saying he was a mama's boy and all this kind of stuff. Baloney. That man, he was God's man. Jacob. Jacob means to trip, or to grab the heel or follow the heel. His brother was born first, but that brother, and we also have in the Bible, we have a law of the rejection of the firstborn. Okay? Before we can even start looking at those tribes, we've got to see the man that made the tribes. Okay? You got to understand Jacob a little bit. Jacob was born, and he sought after the promises and the eternal destiny of his God. And his father was an ungodly buzzard. What was his father's name? Yitzchak. You know what Yitzchak means?
Laughter.
Huh?
Laughter.
It means pleasure. Isaac was a man after pleasure. He was a glutton. He was a glutton. What did he like? Wild meat. And that ungodly buzzard son of his that should have been tending sheep and cattle and horses and all the things, whatever all they had, Esau was out there running around chasing women and chasing wild animals. He was a hunter. That's all he thought about. He didn't care about anything else. Jacob was the breadwinner of the family. He was the one that took care of all the things, guarded the sheep. You know, David, it says later on, David would be a descendant of Jacob. And Jacob killed a lion and a bear and wolves and all kinds of stuff, didn't he? Because when you were a shepherd, you had to guard this, and you had to stand between those wild animals and the sheep. And we find out that after Jacob left and went into Haran with Laban up there, that he never lost a sheep, nothing. Because he was there, Johnny on the spot always. Well, Esau came in one day and he's famished. I'm about to die. Let me have some of your wine and some of that lentil soup. And by the way, lentil soup was the cheapest commodity in the land of Israel. What's the cheapest thing you can buy in the store? Beans and bread. That's it, beans and flour. The cheapest commodity, he said, I will. And Jacob looked at him and he said, now, Esau, I'm not going to give this to you. I'm about to die. And he says, will you trade your birthright to me? Because God had told, Jehovah had told Rebekah that the younger shall be master of the older. And that wasn't this story was there always. They knew this. Both of those boys knew it. Jacob held on to that promise. Esau didn't care. He said, well, so what? I'll give you my birthright. It doesn't matter anything to me. I don't care. The Bible later on says that he hated his birthright. He should have died for it if he needed be. And he said, I'll trade you my birthright for the cheapest commodity in the land of Israel. And he did. And he gluttoned himself. And Jacob just kept on feeding him until he bloated himself. And then, later on in life, not Esau, but Isaac again, a man after pleasure, told the boy. Now, he knew that Jacob had the birthright now because it wasn't unknown. You think this is going to go unknown in this family? That this boy traded his birthright for a bowl of beans, soup, lentils? Nope. So Isaac still is going to thwart the purposes of God. So he tells the boy, go out there quietly now and go hunting, and you come back and bring me some wild game, and and cook it for me, and I will bless you, and I'll give you this blessing anyway, even though you traded it off to Jacob. So he goes out and does that, except Rebekah hears him and said, he's going to thwart the promises of God, which God already told me, so I have to do something. Preachers have preached that this woman was deceitful and all this stuff, that Jacob was a deceiver and all of this type of stuff. All they're doing is trying to hold true to the promises of God. And here we have a guy going the wrong way. The man was going to bless the wrong man. On purpose, he was going to bless the wrong man. So she goes out and gets a goat, and he goes in there and she puts Esau's clothes on him so he'll smell like that stinky buzzard. Smell and feel like him. And he goes in there, well, you sound like Jacob, but you smell like my boy. You smell like my boy. Give me that food. And then he blessed him and gave him all these blessings. Now, the problem is that Jacob was going to bless Esau with all the promises of God, which he didn't care anything about. And God said he didn't care anything about it. It's the real person, the test on is God, isn't it? God said he didn't care. And so he blesses him, and he's not going to give Jacob anything in his mind. Now, what was wrong that he couldn't see? What was wrong? He couldn't see. He was blind, wasn't he? How do you think he got blind? By accident? God blinded that man so he wouldn't bless the wrong person. God had God's eternal purposes. Okay? And so Jacob, he goes to Laban. He does this. Esau comes back, and they both sitting there bawling and bawling and bawling. There's nothing left. I gave it all to your brother. See, I was going to thwart the promises of God and put all the blessings upon you instead of the man of God. So he left because Esau was going to kill Jacob. Now, Esau is a shrimp compared to Jacob. But it's not Jacob that is the killer, is it? It's Esau that's the killer. Here we got a powerful man and we got a deceitful man. And so Mama says, and Esau is still on the rampage. And Isaac says, go and take yourself a wife, not from these heathens here, but from over there. So Isaac finally relinquishes and said, yeah, you are the right guy. You are the right man. So he goes to there and he said, take your wife from among your cousins. And he did, which was Rachel. Except he was deceived. He got 4 wives instead of 1. And these products right here around this tabernacle are a product of those 4 women. Not just Rachel. Rachel was the love of his life. That's all he wanted was her. And on his wedding night, and he worked 7 years for her, and on his wedding night he was deceived, and they gave him Leah instead of Rachel. And according to the laws of Hammurabi, which Laban quoted, that he couldn't give his younger daughter before his older daughter, and they were probably twins, by the way. Here we have 2 more twins. So Jacob marries a twin. What do you think about that? The rejection of the firstborn, the rejection of the firstborn again, all of this. Now that's where we're going to start next week. Did you learn something? Do you have any questions? Huh? No questions? Good to have all of you here. Brother Ray, you got a question? Did I do it right? I don't want to wear you plumb out. I don't know how long it's been, but I think it's been about an hour, nearly. Well, let's have a word of prayer. Brother Ray, would you lead us in prayer, dismiss us in prayer?
Heavenly Father, we thank you once again, Lord, for the time you've given us to come here, Lord, to hear some more of the word, Lord, and try to make sense of it all, try to dissect it, Father, but what we'll do will displease it, put it in our minds, draw it out later, Lord, so we take